Welcome back. So, 14th Amendment. Lots been spoken of that recently here over the last couple years, actually, in particular when it comes to birthright citizenship. So, let's get some facts straight here. First and foremost, when the 14th Amendment was implemented, it was to try to figure out the problem of what to do with 4 million newly freed, formerly enslaved people, foundational Black Americans. They had no history, just due to the transatlantic slave trade. Nobody knew where they came from, aside from they were just taken from Africa. And so, what to do with them and what to do with their children and descendants. So, 14th Amendment was drafted, giving the newly freed slaves guaranteed citizenship. Okay. Moving forward, there were about 13 million European settlers who settled during Reconstruction from Europe. And because of the 14th Amendment, they also received birthright citizenship. And so nothing was ever made of this for the next 150 years. This benefited white people here in this country because it gave them an automatic advantage in terms of population. And as long as the birth rates were good and everything else, nobody really batted an eye. Here recently, with declining birth rates amongst Caucasians, and the descendants of the settlers from Europe who settled this country here, and then the high influx of illegal migration from Central and South America, it's become a hot button topic now. Up until recently, this was not something that anyone was really talking about. But Latin Americans have surpassed African Americans or foundational Black Americans in terms of population, and now they're the second largest minority group in the U.S. According to the latest census numbers. And it's projected probably within the next 20 years that white Americans will actually be in a minority. So, if you got some people that definitely have issue with that, and hence the whole populist movement, Donald Trump, and everything that's going on right now with them trying to revoke birthright citizenship for illegal aliens, and for illegal immigrants, shall we say. Those are, some points. Those are some facts, in terms of how we are where we are right now. I've worked with tons of immigrants. I know a lot of them probably aren't legal. My whole take on that is the way that our economics and everything are set up right now. A lot of that does derive from illegal immigration. That's just, those are just the facts. And so, once you go ahead and start taking out a whole bunch of this workforce, it's going to affect the economy. And so, there have been plenty of opportunities to get this figured out, but the can kept getting kicked down the road. And so now here we are in this situation right now. Throwing out, a bunch of people without due process, I don't think that's the right answer either. But, at the same time, something has to be done here. Something has to be figured out here. Right now, you're seeing a lot of farms in ruby red states losing their entire workforce because either people are self-deporting, moving to other states as to where there's a lot less heat from ice, or they're just not shown to work already. And, we're going to see some huge problems when it comes to what the cost of foods and groceries are here in the upcoming months, because in a lot of cases, you just got food out there in the fields. Literally, this is going to be rotting on the vines, rotting on the ground, and that's just going to create all sorts of other issues, as to where then all of a sudden we're going to be relying on other countries for our food supply, which puts us in a very, very, very dangerous position. So I'm going to talk about some things that need to get out here. Okay, so most Latin American people that I've worked with, really nice people, really kind people. This isn't directed at you. The ones that this is directed to are the ones who maybe you thought back in your country you were white, or maybe you thought that because you're fair skinned, that was going to carry over into how you were going to be treated here in this country. So let me explain a couple things to you here. First and foremost, the gold standard, dare I say, in terms of what's considered white here, are what these people call themselves, which are WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, white Anglo-Saxon Catholics, and then also white European Jews. Okay, that's the gold standard in terms of white people. If you look at some of the census data going back to the 19th century, you had a few groups of people. You had your whites, and in terms of the ancestry, these were people of the northern European countries. So anyone with Germanic ancestry, such as Germans, Britons, anybody who was Anglo-Saxon, i.e. the French, the Brits, to a lesser point the Irish, Scandinavians. The Battle of Hastings, 1066. Those people fought each other off and on for decades or centuries over there, and so that's the white people right there. When you looked at the other census categories, you had non-white, and then you had black or Negro. Okay, and so the non-whites were people usually from other parts of Europe, and they were usually from the Slavic countries or from the Mediterranean parts of Europe, where there was a lot more olive skin complexion just due to their intermixing with Arabs. And then also, when we go back in history, we know that the Moors that conquered what's now modern-day Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Greece, as well as Northern Africa. So the lower part of Europe, tends to be a little more olive complexion, versus the northern parts of Europe. They tend to be a little whiter. And so up until really the 20th century, a lot of what we consider white people, today, weren't considered white. They were considered, non-white. That's something in American history that, unless you're from here, you probably don't know that. And so, for all the, Latinos who, thought they were white, some of the Cubans, the Venezuelans, some of the South Americans, and I'm just going to tie in an anecdote here. I remember years ago, I dated a Colombian woman, and she was extremely fair-skinned, and to her shock and horror, when she got here to the U.S., because back home, she was considered white, but when she got here to the States, she was considered Latino, and, with all those slurs and bigotry and stuff like that came along with it. And so for, you Latinos out there who, thought that you were white, I don't care how white you may think that you look or what it was back home, you'll never, ever, ever be considered an Anglo-Saxon here. Ever. Or a WASP, as they call them. Okay, just, so just get that out of your mind. Sorry to break it to you, but, that's just the way it is. And a lot of you played yourself because you wound up selling out yourselves, and you wind up selling out a bunch of people in your community also, thinking that, okay, well, because I'm associating, with, some of these people who've got racist and bigoted ideology, we're going to be fine. We're going to be okay. And you know what? They're trying to deport all of you right now. So, that's, those are the facts right there. Going back to some of the other, classifications, which I was talking about, I did forget, to mention, there was a small segment of Asian that was left on some of the census as well. And actually, if you go back to 1970s television, because these classifications in terms of whiteness, if you would, were taught well into my generation, because I learned what it was to be a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Catholic, or white Anglo-Saxon Catholic, when I was in school. Because I went to a predominantly white prep school in Philadelphia, so I was exposed to people with money and their families with money, and also I went to school with like a lot of European Jews as well too, and so it's like everybody knew where they fit in terms of society and stuff like that, and they all spoke about it amongst themselves in front of all the other kids, and that's just the way it was. I remember watching episodes of All in the Family back in the 70s, created by the late Norman Lear. And, one of the things that was very prevalent then was, once again, this whole categorizing of, some of the groups of white people. One of the things he would always do was, make fun of his son-in-law, the meathead, and, he would use a derogatory, Polish term to describe what he was, because, once again, that older generation of white people, the ones who had the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant roots, they didn't see the Slavic races from Eastern Europe as really being white. They kind of saw them as less than. So I know I've unpacked a whole bunch of stuff here, but let me know what you think in the comments here, and we'll see you next time.